At my son's graduation, Tommy and his mother publicly humiliated me by announcing that I had been the worst father in history and didn't deserve to be there. The whole thing started on what was supposed to be one of the proudest days of my life. I had taken the afternoon off work, picked up my best dress, and even stopped by the florist to grab a small bouquet for Tommy. Walking into that high school gymnasium, I felt this overwhelming surge of pride seeing all those kids in their caps and gowns. My baby boy was graduating, and despite everything that had happened between his mother and me over the years, I was determined to be there for this moment. The ceremony itself went smoothly. I spotted Tommy in the sea of graduates and managed to catch his eye during the diploma presentation. He gave me this little wave, and my heart just melted. After the formal ceremony ended, families started gathering in the multipurpose room for the reception. The school had set up these round tables with white tablecloths, and there were photo displays showing senior year memories scattered around the room. Parents were mingling, taking pictures, and everyone seemed so happy. I was standing near the refreshment table trying to balance a paper plate of cookies and a cup of punch when I noticed Tommy walking toward me with his mother. My ex-wife looked more dressed up than usual, wearing this navy blue dress I'd never seen before. Something about the way they were approaching made my stomach tighten, but I pushed that feeling aside. This was Tommy's day, and I wasn't going to let old tensions ruin it. What happened next still makes my chest feel tight when I think about it. Tommy stopped right in front of me, and suddenly the chatter around us seemed to quiet down. Other parents and family members were still talking, but it felt like the whole room was watching us. My ex-wife stepped up beside Tommy, and they both had these serious expressions on their faces that I couldn't quite read. Tommy cleared his throat and started speaking in this voice that was louder than necessary, almost like he was performing for an audience. He began listing all the ways I had supposedly failed him as a father. He talked about missed soccer games, forgotten birthday parties, and how I had supposedly prioritized my own life over being there for him. Each word felt like a physical blow. I stood there holding my paper plate, watching my son tear me apart in front of people I'd known for years. His mother jumped in seamlessly, adding her own commentary about how I had never really stepped up to the responsibilities of being a parent. She mentioned specific incidents that I barely remembered, painting them in the worst possible light. The way she spoke made it sound like I had been completely absent from Tommy's life, like I was some sort of deadbeat who only showed up when it was convenient for me. The worst part was how other parents started to notice. I could see them turning to look at us, some pretending to examine the photo displays while obviously listening to every word. A few family friends who had known us since Tommy was little were standing nearby, and I watched their expressions change from confusion to something that looked like pity mixed with judgment. Tommy continued his speech, talking about how embarrassed he was to call me his father and how he wished I hadn't even bothered showing up to his graduation. His mother nodded along with everything he said, occasionally adding her own comments about my shortcomings. They seemed so coordinated, so prepared with their list of grievances. It felt rehearsed in a way that made the whole situation even more surreal. My hands started shaking as I stood there, still clutching that ridiculous paper plate. I wanted to defend myself, to explain my side of all those situations they were bringing up, but I couldn't find my voice. The humiliation was overwhelming. These were people who had watched Tommy grow up, who had been to our barbecues and holiday parties back when we were still married. Now they were witnessing what felt like a complete character assassination. The conversation seemed to go on forever, though it probably only lasted a few minutes. Other families were starting to leave, and I kept thinking about how this moment would overshadow everything else about Tommy's graduation day. Instead of celebrating his achievement, we were having this brutal public confrontation that I didn't understand. Tommy's voice got even more dramatic as he talked about feeling let down and disappointed by me over the years. He mentioned specific times when I had supposedly made promises I didn't keep, and his mother backed up every claim with her own memories of my failures. They painted this picture of me as someone who talked a good game but never followed through on anything important. I finally managed to set down the paper plate on a nearby table because my hands were shaking so badly. The cookies I had picked up were probably crushed by then, but that seemed like the least of my problems. I kept looking around the room, hoping someone would rescue me from this nightmare, but everyone seemed frozen in place, watching this family drama unfold. The emotional weight of hearing my son say he was ashamed of me was almost unbearable. All those years of trying to maintain a relationship after the divorce, all those awkward pickup times and shared custody schedules, and this was what it had led to. I started questioning every interaction we'd had, wondering if I had really been as terrible as they were making me sound. His mother seemed to be building up to some sort of finale, talking about how I didn't deserve to be called his father and how this graduation was really about Tommy's own strength in overcoming the disappointment of having me as a parent. The words stung more than anything she had said during our divorce proceedings. At least then we had been fighting about our relationship with each other, not about my relationship with our son. I was fighting back tears and considering whether I should just leave when something completely unexpected happened. Tommy suddenly broke character and rushed toward me with the biggest grin I'd ever seen on his face. Before I could process what was happening, he wrapped me in this enormous hug that nearly knocked me off my feet. Update 1. The confusion on my face must have been obvious because Tommy started laughing while he was still hugging me. His mother was smiling too, which made absolutely no sense given what had just happened. I pulled back from the hug and looked at both of them like they had lost their minds. The other parents who had been watching our confrontation looked just as bewildered as I felt. Tommy started explaining that his drama teacher had given the class a final project where they had to perform a difficult conversation with someone in their life. The assignment was designed to help them practice dealing with confrontational situations and standing up to authority figures. He had chosen to stage a conversation about disappointment with parental relationships, and he had asked his mother to help him rehearse. I stood there processing this information while Tommy continued talking excitedly about how he had been working on this performance for weeks. He explained that they had carefully planned out all the things they were going to say, trying to make it as realistic as possible. His mother chimed in, saying that she had initially been hesitant to participate because she was worried about how convincing it might sound, but Tommy had convinced her that it would be good practice for his acting skills. The relief I felt was so intense that my legs almost gave out. All those horrible things they had said, all those accusations and complaints, none of it was real. Well, the situations they had mentioned were real, but their interpretation of those events was completely fabricated for the sake of Tommy's drama project. I had spent the last 10 minutes thinking my son hated me, and it turned out he was just showing off his acting abilities. Tommy kept talking about how proud he was of his performance and how he hoped his drama teacher would be impressed with how realistic the whole thing had seemed. He mentioned that several of his classmates had chosen to do their projects with siblings or friends, but he had wanted to challenge himself by involving multiple people and creating a more complex scenario. His mother apologized for not warning me ahead of time, explaining that Tommy had convinced her that the surprise element would make the performance more authentic. She admitted that watching my reaction had been harder than she had expected, and she could see how genuinely hurt I had been by their words. She said they had both been impressed by how well I had handled the situation, even though I looked like I was about to cry. The other parents who had witnessed the whole thing started to understand what had happened, and a few of them came over to congratulate Tommy on his acting skills. One family friend mentioned that she had been completely convinced by the performance and had started feeling sorry for me. Another parent said that Tommy should definitely consider pursuing acting more seriously because he had completely fooled everyone. I was still processing the emotional whiplash of going from devastation to relief in a matter of seconds. My heart was still racing from the stress of thinking I had lost my son's respect, and now I was supposed to switch gears and be proud of his dramatic abilities. It was like being on an emotional roller coaster that I hadn't bought a ticket for. Tommy seemed oblivious to how traumatic the experience had been for me. He was buzzing with excitement about his project and kept asking if I thought his performance had been convincing. He wanted to know which parts had seemed the most realistic and whether I had any suggestions for how he could improve his delivery. His enthusiasm was infectious, but I was still feeling shaky from the whole experience. His mother could see that I was struggling to adjust to this new reality. She suggested that we sit down and let me catch my breath while Tommy went to find some of his friends to tell them about his successful performance. She guided me to one of the empty tables and sat down beside me, looking slightly guilty about their elaborate prank. We sat there for a few minutes while I tried to wrap my head around what had just happened. She explained that Tommy had been working on this project for over a month and had been incredibly excited about the idea of surprising me with his acting skills. He had apparently practiced the speech multiple times at home, refining his delivery and working on his facial expressions to make sure he looked appropriately disappointed and angry. She told me that Tommy had specifically chosen this scenario because he wanted to practice dealing with difficult emotions and confrontational situations. His drama teacher had encouraged the students to pick topics that would challenge them emotionally, and Tommy had thought that pretending to be disappointed in me would be the hardest thing he could imagine doing. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Update 2. As the evening went on, I started to appreciate the complexity of what Tommy had pulled off. Not only had he managed to stay in character throughout that entire brutal speech, but he had also coordinated with his mother to create a believable scenario that had fooled everyone present. The level of planning and preparation that had gone into his performance was actually pretty impressive. Tommy came back to our table with a group of his friends, all of whom were eager to hear about his drama project. Apparently, several of them had also done their final performances that week, but none of them had attempted anything as ambitious as what Tommy had done. One of his friends mentioned that she had done her project as a monologue about dealing with peer pressure, while another had staged a conversation with his younger brother about sharing responsibilities. Listening to Tommy describe his process to his friends helped me understand just how much thought he had put into this project. He talked about researching different acting techniques and studying videos of real confrontations to make his performance more authentic. He had even practiced different ways of delivering certain lines to see which approach would have the most emotional impact. His mother revealed that she had been nervous about participating because she wasn't sure she could stay in character effectively. She admitted that there had been moments during their performance when she had almost broken character because she could see how much pain I was experiencing. She said that watching my face during Tommy's speech had been one of the hardest things she'd ever had to do. Tommy seemed genuinely surprised that his performance had been so convincing. He had expected me to figure out what was happening much sooner, especially since some of the situations he had mentioned were fairly minor incidents that we had already talked through over the years. He said he had been worried that I would catch on to the fact that he was exaggerating and putting a negative spin on things that hadn't actually been problems between us. The more we talked about it, the more I realized how much this project had revealed about Tommy's understanding of acting and human psychology. He had correctly identified which buttons to push to make his performance believable, and he had managed to create genuine emotional responses in everyone who witnessed it. His drama teacher was going to be very impressed with the level of sophistication he had brought to this assignment. Several other parents came over throughout the evening to talk about Tommy's performance. Some of them mentioned that they had been completely taken in by the act and had started thinking about their own relationships with their children. One mother said that watching our confrontation had made her reflect on whether her own teenage son felt supported and appreciated. As the reception started winding down, Tommy pulled me aside to have a more serious conversation about his project. He wanted to make sure that I understood how much he appreciated everything I had done for him over the years and that none of the things he had said during his performance reflected his actual feelings about our relationship. He told me that choosing to focus on disappointment with a parent had been difficult for him because he genuinely couldn't think of many real complaints he had about me. He said that he had to work hard to imagine what it would feel like to be genuinely upset with me and that most of the specific incidents he had mentioned were things that had never actually bothered him. Tommy explained that his drama teacher had emphasized the importance of tapping into real emotions to make performances more authentic, but since he didn't have genuine resentment toward me to draw from, he had to create those feelings artificially. He said that the hardest part of the whole project had been maintaining that emotional state throughout his entire speech without letting his real affection for me show through. His mother joined our conversation and shared her own perspective on participating in Tommy's project. She said that despite our divorce and the various challenges we had faced over the years, she had always respected my commitment to staying involved in Tommy's life. She admitted that she had been worried about how realistic their performance might seem, given that some of the situations they referenced were based on real events, even if their interpretation was completely fabricated. We spent the rest of the evening talking about Tommy's future plans and his interest in continuing with drama and acting. His performance had clearly demonstrated a natural talent for the craft, and several people had suggested that he consider auditioning for local theater productions or looking into drama programs at the colleges he was considering. The whole experience had been emotionally exhausting, but it had also given me a new appreciation for Tommy's creativity and his ability to understand complex human emotions. Even though his performance had put me through an emotional ringer, I couldn't help but feel proud of what he had accomplished. Final update. Looking back on that graduation day several months later, I can honestly say it became one of the most memorable and meaningful experiences Tommy and I have ever shared. What started as the most humiliating moment of my life turned into a celebration of my son's incredible talent and creativity. Tommy ended up getting the highest grade in his drama class for that final project. His teacher was so impressed with the complexity and authenticity of his performance that she used it as an example for future students. She particularly praised his ability to maintain character throughout such an emotionally challenging scenario and his skill at coordinating with multiple participants to create a believable scene. The experience also brought his mother and me closer together in some unexpected ways. Participating in Tommy's project had required us to work as a team in a way we hadn't done since our divorce. She later told me that preparing for the performance had made her think about our co-parenting relationship and how well we had managed to put Tommy's needs first despite our own differences. Tommy decided to pursue acting more seriously after graduation. He auditioned for several local theater productions and landed a supporting role in a community theater production that fall. Watching him perform on stage for the first time since his graduation day surprise, I was amazed by his natural stage presence and his ability to completely transform into different characters. The incident also had an unexpected impact on some of the other families who witnessed it. Several parents reached out to me in the weeks following graduation to talk about how Tommy's performance had made them reflect on their own relationships with their children. One father mentioned that watching our confrontation had motivated him to have some difficult but necessary conversations with his own son about their relationship. Tommy's friends were so impressed with his graduation day performance that several of them asked him to help them with their own acting projects and auditions. He started informal coaching sessions with some of his classmates, sharing the techniques he had learned and helping them develop their own performance skills. The whole experience taught me something important about not taking things at face value and about the power of performance to reveal truth in unexpected ways. Even though Tommy's speech had been completely fabricated, the emotions it generated in everyone present were absolutely real. The fear, hurt, and confusion I felt during those few minutes were genuine responses to what seemed like a genuine situation. More importantly, the experience reinforced just how much Tommy and I mean to each other. The fact that he couldn't draw from real disappointment or resentment to fuel his performance actually spoke volumes about the strength of our relationship. He had to work hard to imagine feeling let down by me because that wasn't something he had actually experienced. His mother and I have joked several times since then about how convincing their performance was and how completely they managed to fool everyone present. She's admitted that there were moments during the whole thing when she almost forgot it was an act because Tommy was so committed to staying in character. Tommy still brings up his graduation day performance whenever he wants to demonstrate his acting abilities to new people. He's gotten pretty good at reenacting parts of his speech, though he always makes sure to explain the context first so nobody thinks he's actually criticizing me. The whole experience has become a favorite family story that we share at gatherings. The emotional roller coaster of that day taught me to appreciate the moments when Tommy shows his creativity and ambition even when they catch me completely off guard. His willingness to take risks and challenge himself continues to impress me whether he's tackling difficult acting roles or pursuing other goals. Looking at where we are now, I'm grateful that Tommy chose to include me in his project even though the experience was initially terrifying. It demonstrated his trust in our relationship and his confidence that I would ultimately support his artistic endeavors even if they occasionally put me through emotional stress. The whole experience has become a reminder that sometimes the most challenging moments can lead to the most meaningful connections and discoveries about the people we love.